Okay, how's it going? Scott here. We're going to dive into this record label business plan. This is a free template. So I just want to show you how to use it. And there's lots of different ways that you can use it, but it's free for you to use. The link to download this template is in the description below, or you can go to otherrecordlabels.com/business plan. That's otherrecordlabels.com/business plan. And of course, the link is in the description below to download this as a PowerPoint file if you have Microsoft PowerPoint. And then what I'm showing you right now is a Google Slides file. And so there's a link to access that Google Slides file. And all you have to do is, let me see if I can show you here. Go to File, make a copy, entire presentation, and then it becomes your own. Because right now you shouldn't be able to edit it because it's a file that I've shared with everyone. So you have to go make your own copy of it and then you can edit it. So, but there's also a PowerPoint. There's also a Word document. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick. So there's also this Google Docs, which I've included as a PDF, and a Google Docs file that you do the same process. Go File, make a copy of it, and then you can use it for yourself. And then I've also included a Word doc, which you can open in tons of different software. But this is an outline of what you're going to see in the PowerPoint presentation. And it's just a good idea to maybe spend a couple of days, even a full week, starting with the outline, typing it in Word, answering these, acting as if these are questions before you start to implement them into this presentation file. Because what you're looking at right now is a presentation file. What you would show to a potential investor or a new employee or somebody who's going to come on your team, on your record label, or even an artist who you want to sign to your record label. This is something that you might present to them. Now, do you need a record label business plan? What are record label business plans for, and all that good stuff? There's another video. It's more of a kind of an overview on what this is and why these are important. It's not, this is like an actual tutorial on how to build this. But an overview video is in the description below. So make sure you watch that as well. Okay, let's take a look at this. So this is a cover page, and you can edit this by going to background. So if you don't like this image that I've had, you can keep this if you want, but if you have your own image, or if you just want it to be like a solid color, then you go to background and you change that yourself. And this is all, you're able to change this too. You can get rid of other record labels here, and then you can enter your label name. And I always like to say presented by, because then it just shows that this is something that you're kind of showing to people. You don't really necessarily, they can view it on their own, but it's a good idea if you're there to present it. Okay, so the first slide, I'm going to go through these really quickly because this is all for you to fill out and to complete. We do have a totally completed version of this as an example, and a completed version of the outline that's in our Record Label Everything bundle, and that's just for our people who have all of our courses, and you can check the link in the description for that as well. But this is just an outline. So basically what you want to do with this is you want to take this outline, assuming you've done this in the Word document first, but you could even do it in here, and you can change this to be your record label name, your contact details, maybe a little history of your experience in the industry, and if you have any training or degrees or anything like that. And so that's where you would put that. The summary is a unique selling point. So I'm just going to quickly define what all of these subtopics are and what all these, so we basically have like 12 slides or 11 slides, and then each of them have these subpoints that you're to fill in. Remember, not all of these are vital, and you don't have to include all of them. You could totally make your own choice on what you include and what you don't include. So you may say, listen, I don't want to include my financial goals. Well, you really should, but I don't want to include a mission statement or whatever. Some of this you can pull out or whatnot. Unique selling point. These are just, this should be like 1 to 3 or 4 sentences. You want to kind of keep it brief, because the longer you get, then it shows the person that you're presenting this to, or even if you're reviewing it for yourself, that you don't really know exactly what you want. It's very important that you're targeted and very specific. So a unique selling point is what makes your record label special. Why do you think people should invest with you, or people should sign to your label, or help you accomplish this goal? What makes your record label special? What's your label initiative? Do you have something that is that you're your overarching goal or trying to achieve, or something that you do that's very special. Your mission statement, if you have time to craft this, you can pull this out if you want. But this is good to have. And this is, you can search some other record labels who have examples of a mission statement, but it should be basically like who you are, what you hope to do, and how you plan on doing it. Financial goals, these should be some really overarching financial goals. These should be just big financial goals. They don't have to be, super didactic and in the weeds. They can be just saying, year one, we want to make $10,000. Year two, I want to make $20,000. Year three, I want to make $40,000. That kind of thing. You might even want to talk about your how you plan. It could be philosophical too for finances. It could be like how you plan to keep your expenses low and your revenue high, and trying to keep that balance for profit. Okay, so there's something called the SWOT analysis. You've probably heard this in marketing and business before. And basically, this is your strengths, your weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So it's an acronym, if you will. And is it an acronym, or is it a different term? I don't know if it's yeah, let's say it's an acronym. So your strengths, what makes you strong? What makes you the right person to start a record label? What makes you the right person to do this? Now, talk about your weaknesses. What are things that you're lacking as an individual, as a business person, that you need somebody else to achieve, or that could just be something that to look out for? And so maybe that's a digital distribution. Maybe you are more into the physical music world, but digital distribution is a weakness for you. It's important to be honest. Don't be like, pat yourself on the back with this weakness, and say like, oh, I'm too smart. That's a weakness. That's silly. What opportunities do you see in this industry? Why are you starting this label? Like, why do you think that there's an opportunity for your label to be successful while other labels are maybe struggling to be successful? What is that? It goes back to that unique selling point. And so you need to think, I have this opportunity. It could be the fact that I was talking to a guy recently who owns a record store, very popular indie record store in a city. And he wants to start a record label as under the banner of that record store. And to me, that's a great opportunity, right? Because he already has an audience. He already has customers. He already has access to people who buy records. And so he could literally just sell those records in his store, and he would probably do better than most record labels. What threats? Now, these are different from weaknesses, because what are the things that may challenge you as a record label, even if you're strong in certain areas? And that might be the extremely long production delays and supply chain issues that are happening now with vinyl and CD and cassette manufacturing. It could be the fact that more and more people are releasing music, and now we're approaching 100,000 new songs uploaded to Spotify every single day. That's mind-blowing. And that could be a threat to your record label, and how are you going to work around that? Okay, now let's talk about label objectives really quickly. Do you have an overarching priority? Do you have a reason for existing? This is a little bit different from your unique selling point, because a unique selling point, or a USP, is focusing on maybe something very special or very targeted, or kind of like I think of a USP as like if you have like a shortcut for getting somewhere. If everyone takes the highway, but you have a way of getting there, like, going around the corner or taking some side streets, that's kind of a USP. An overarching priority is saying, here is what we're about as a record label, and this is our main goal. It might just be your overarching priority is to create really beautiful vinyl packaging, or your overarching priority might be to make sure that artists on your label can work a part-time job and not have to struggle. And maybe it's a good idea to come up with top 3 objectives. Like, what are your top objectives for the record label? And maybe you could put those into buckets in different categories. One of them is maybe a financial objective. One is maybe a more philosophical objective about helping artists or helping marginalized groups or fundraising. And then a final one could be more about the art or the creativity, or something like that. And so come up with a few objectives that all complement your top objective. It's really good for people, whoever's you're presenting this business plan to know that you have a mission, that you have a reason for existing, because otherwise when it gets tough and when finances are tough, what's going to keep you going? So it's also good to come up with some short-term goals. Like, if you're saying that you want to be a sustainable record label that has 3 employees, that's something that should be a long-term goal. It really shouldn't be a short-term goal. It's something that would be very hard to accomplish in year 1. As you put these short-term goals together and these long-term goals, remember this great quote: people overestimate what they can do in 1 year, but underestimate what they can do in 10 years. And I think the same is true if we were to scale that down and say that people overestimate what they can do in a month and underestimate what they can do in a year. The principle is the same. It's basically saying that put together some short-term goals, but your long-term goals are really where the main accomplishment should happen, and where the main objective should be is in your long-term goals. This is where you want to maybe put some who's involved with your label. And if there aren't that many people, or if you don't, you can remove this section, or you can just take this opportunity to elaborate on what you're going to do as an individual. If you're the only person who's launching and running your record label, then you can talk about what you bring to the table, whether that's actual equipment or expertise. Otherwise, you can mention the personnel who's coming on board, whether those volunteers or experts or partners in your business. Who's going to take care of the accounting on a day-to-day basis? What's your plan? And then, do you have an accounting firm or a lawyer on board? Are there any assets and equipment that you're bringing to the table? Do you have a recording studio, or are you a mastering engineer, or do you have printing capabilities, merch making capabilities, and any relationships and partnerships that you're also bringing? That's really important, because you might have some sort of connection with a pressing plant right off the bat, or with a digital distributor, or maybe your friend who's going to be helping you with this label is also a music publicist or works for a company who's going to immediately take on your artist right from the beginning and do their publicity for them. So you want to mention any of those partnerships. And if you don't have a partnership or relationship with one of these companies, it could be interesting to look for that before you launch. I should also mention, when I say before you launch, I also want to mention that this record label business plan, and I talk about this in the other video, but this record label business plan is applicable not only to people who are thinking about starting a record label, but it's also applicable to people who have had a record label going for a year or for 5 years, because it kind of like summarizes everything about your label, the philosophical things, but also the practical and tangible things. And it's really good to kind of focus in and say, you know what, we actually don't have someone who's doing this, or we've kind of forgotten about this, or we've lost the plot. And so I encourage you, and if you're watching this, you probably already are doing it, but I encourage you to consider, if you're in year 1 or year 2, or you've been doing your record label for a while, to maybe, and you don't have a business plan, to go and create one. It could really help you focus. Let's talk about label services. This is where you want to talk about what your plan is. And I like to keep these super short. And if you see the example version, if you're in our Everything Bundle customers, you'll see my example version of a completely filled out business plan. But I like to keep this 1 or 2 sentences, okay? It's just a short description of how you plan to do A&R, like finding new artists, your strategy for manufacturing, your strategy for distribution, and maybe a few points about marketing and your plan for that. Remember, you're not outlining your entire marketing strategy for a release plan. This is just something that to skim by, to let people know that you have some sort of strategy in place. The same thing for label branding. How are you going to build an aesthetic, an overall vibe for your brand? Who's your target market? And a good way to talk about your target market is to come up with a customer avatar and to think, okay, if I were selling classical music, high-end, hi-fi vinyl that features modern jazz or classical music, you know that my customer avatar, the ideal customer, if I were to close my eyes and picture who is ordering online this $50 vinyl of classical music or jazz music, you know that this person is probably sophisticated, probably educated, They probably have like a job in the arts or in education, or they're kind of maybe a little bit of pretentious. They drink wine, they probably drive a nice car, they dress nicely, they live in a nice house, that kind of thing. And so so you could create that if you think like, oh, my music is lo-fi punk. Well, the avatar for that person is going to be completely different than the pretentious classical music listener. I'm totally picking on them, but hopefully they're not watching this. So come up with some sort of customer avatar. That can change all the time, but that just really helps you to know when you're creating new products, you can kind of picture your ideal customer in mind. When we're talking about label branding, we also want to go back to our unique selling point. That is part of our brand. If your unique selling point is helping marginalized individuals in a certain area, whether it's women in music, or if it's the LGBTQ community, or if you are focusing on an indigenous language in the country that you're from, or a certain group of people that you feel their voices haven't been heard in the music industry and you want to represent them, or you want to amplify their voices, that's a unique selling point. That's something that separates you from other record labels and makes you special and gives fans a reason to support you and to latch onto you. And so that's, in a way, that's part of your brand. And it's why I'm bringing it up again. And it's something you can copy and paste from the previous slide. And then also a little bit about your market research. If you've done some market research and you found out what type of formats does your market like, if your customer avatar is high school students, if you're dealing in like pop music, or it's like late high school, early college years, well, they don't have a ton of money to spend, right? You know that they're very tech savvy and that they probably are discovering music on TikTok and they're listening to music on their mobile device. And so, or maybe they're even streaming it on YouTube and they want more direct connection with their artist. This is the kind of things that you should be including in the market research, that you should be really looking into. Who is our audience? It's a terrible idea to start a record label, regardless of your genre, and to think my audience is everyone in the world ages 5 to 95. That just is not true. Of course, there's going to be outliers and people are going to appreciate your music at various demographics and all over the world. That's great. But there should be kind of a cohesive market that your label appeals to. And maybe this is something you discover later on. It's not something that you can necessarily pinpoint this early in the game. And then, of course, part of your branding is your overall marketing strategy too. If you want to focus on playlisting, if you want to focus on a YouTube channel for each of your artists, this is a good time to mention that. Is your brand part of your marketing? There's a lot of record labels who have such a cool looking brand that they sell merch and they do partnerships with other fashion designers, and they make printable art that people collect, and the record label, their brand is actually part of their marketing, and that people are drawn to their brand just as much as they're drawn to the music. It's also important to kind of talk about your financial strategy. What are some of your initial costs? What are some of your initial funding sources? Are you investing personally? Are your friends and your partners investing? Do other people have ownership in the company? That's important to mention. Projected revenue. And again, you got to be really realistic here. And so if I say that your projected revenue for year one is $10,000, well, that's just shy of $1,000 a month, right? That's like maybe $800 a month. And so $800 a month is about $200 a week. And so 10,000 is not a lot of money. I mean, you can't really live on that. If you have to pay half of it to the artist and expenses, nobody can live on that. That's extremely tough. But I'm just telling you that 10,000 a year is very, very real, very difficult. It's realistic. But it's difficult because as you boil it down and you kind of reverse engineer it down to $200 a week nonstop for an entire year, that's hard to do, right? I mean, especially it might be easy to do when a new album comes out, but what happens when that album's old and it's been out for 2 or 3 months now and people aren't talking about it as much, it isn't selling as many copies, so you have to have another strategy in place. And so be realistic when you're putting together your projected revenue and have some things to reach for. So if year one is something modest like $10,000, then make year 2 still modest, $20,000. That's double your revenue from year 1, but it's still $20,000 once you share it with the artist and take away all your expenses. Still not necessarily a full-time job, but be realistic here. You also want to talk about your additional revenue sources. So when people are, depending on who you're presenting this to, they might understand, okay, a record label makes money by selling CDs or vinyl records, or they make money by selling music on Spotify. But it's important to list some other revenue sources, and I talk about multiple revenue streams a lot on this channel, but it's important to talk about other revenue sources that you have planned. So that could be merch, t-shirts, sweatshirts, and hoodies. It could be some sync licensing or catalog licensing that you have planned for your artists and for your catalog. Maybe you have a recording studio. You're also going to bring in mixing and mastering revenue to complement the album sales revenue. And also outline your monthly and yearly operational costs. You don't have to do yearly. I mean, yearly is just your monthly times 12, but there might be some things that you pay by the year, but there's going to be a lot of services, right? Like if you're paying for a membership to Bandcamp, or if you need like a Vimeo or a Dropbox membership or a DistroKid membership or some other type of membership you're going to need. So include that in your operational costs, your Squarespace page, etc. And then as we come to the end, put together a little summary, because if you've been presenting to someone for over an hour, then they've probably forgot everything that you mentioned in the beginning. So reiterate your mission statement. That really is the reason you get out of bed in the morning, the reason why you're doing this in the first place. Your launch plan, what needs to happen in order, and this could be a slide on its own, but what needs to happen in order for your record label to take off? And so, we need this signing, we need this to be registered, social media thing, investment here. This is our launch plan. And maybe that launch plan is a 6-month or a year-long process. Maybe you're pitching this to someone and you're not going to launch yet. You're launching, at the start of the next year or at the next fall or something. Your year 1 strategy, what do you hope to accomplish? Not just financially, but with your record label as a whole. And your 5-year strategy. I mean, do you have a plan? If year 1 goes as planned or better than planned, then what's your 5-year strategy? And then accountability process is something that you might want to include. And you don't have to include this, but it's good to say, here's my mission statement. Here's our launch plan. Here's our year 1 plan and our 5-year plan. And here's how we're going to ensure that we meet these goals. Here's the safety net we have in place. We're going to, I'm going to do a quarterly report for my investors. I'm going to do a monthly summary. Every single month, I'm going to summarize. You know how Spotify sends you those once a month, or they send it at the year end, but they also send you once a month your, like, how many streams you've had, how many playlists you were put on, those kind of like stats in a nice little infographic. Well, maybe once a month in your first year. If you don't have time, it could be quarterly, but monthly is cool, is to say, this is how many hits our site got. This is, how many total streams all of our artists had on all streaming platforms, or maybe just on Spotify. We were mentioned in 5 press articles. We were added to 10 different playlists, and then maybe list like 2 or 3 really cool things that happened, but also list 2 or 3 bad things that happened, a conflict with an artist, or lost out on a great sync licensing, or we missed a release date because of production delays. This is like journaling, right? And so it's really important for you to have this summary monthly in your first year, and maybe you move on to quarterly, maybe eventually it's just an annual thing. But I think it's great monthly. And seriously, spend like the first Monday of the month just kind of recapping the previous month. Do it in a Word doc, do it in a Google Doc. It doesn't have to be a gorgeous presentation, but do it on a piece of paper. It's just a way to journal and to say, these are the things that happened. And And what's going to be great about that is that you're going to have forgotten all the great things that happened last month. And you're going to be like, oh, yeah, actually, that was a good month, even though we didn't meet our financial goals or whatnot. So I think that is really helpful for you to do. And it's also a way to share those documents with other people and your artists to say, look what we've done, but look what we need to do better. And then to make sure that each month, you know, in the back of your mind now, at the end of this month, I have to write a summary for this month. So I better, hit the pavement and start making some phone calls and starting to sell some records and work with new artists, because I don't want my summary to be empty. And so that's kind of part of the accountability process. So this is the template. Totally use it as you want. The link in the description below to download it. It's totally free. It's all yours. Remove things, chop it up, do whatever you want with it. Don't sell it, you big dummy, but just use it however you want. And redesign it, make it look cooler than this. I kept it really basic, but I think this should really help you. And again, there's in addition to the link for downloading this, there's also another video where I kind of just dive into the overall big picture of why it's important to have a record label business plan at whatever stage you're at in your record label career. I mean, you could be running a record label for 12 years like I have. And I'm kind of thinking, you know what, I need to make one of these for myself again. I had one 12 years ago, and it was very helpful to show to artists and to show to other people who wanted to volunteer with the label. But maybe I should make a new one and kind of see how things have changed. So I hope you found this helpful. Download this, watch the other video. Take care.